Hi, my name is Andrew Sears, and I'm the president of City Vision University. And we've worked with hundreds of Christian ministries and addiction recovery programs. And if I had to say what is the domain of holistic recovery that might have the biggest leverage, that often we're not leveraging as effectively as possible, it might be this relationship between physical health, mental health, and addiction. Now, in the past 10 years especially, there's been an increased priority on this, but I think there's a lot of ways to go in this, and I'm really excited about sharing about this in your own recovery because I think it can make a really big difference. So I want to relate how physical health helps holistic recovery. So in this, let me first kind of relate this to my own experience. So I went into recovery and I did a lot of trauma processing. I did a lot of thought management, managing my emotions, learned a lot about healthy relationships, and even started to get, I would say I had two major almost conversion experiences in my recovery process. One was I had these broken thoughts, and honestly, it was related to broken core beliefs where I didn't do self-care. And had a conversion experience on that and realized that, if God values me, I need to value me, and I need to be able to have good boundaries in self-care. But the second core experience was around my physical health. Around the age 35, I wasn't able to get through the day without taking naps, and I was just always feeling tired. I went to the doctor, and he said that he thought that I had something called adrenal fatigue, and I read about it, and I knew that I had a history of trauma with PTSD. And adrenal fatigue is kind of like if you're too stressed chronically and you're too elevated or hypervigilant chronically, your body just runs out of what it needs. Your adrenal system runs out of what it needs to keep functioning. So I realized, I had been taught, and I grew up in Kansas City. We used to be the obesity capital of the country. Barbecue there is almost a religion. And eating unhealthy was a part of my culture. It was a part of the pride. In college, whenever I went to college and had a first cook for myself, actually in grad school, I didn't know how to cook for myself, and my hair started falling out because I was just cooking horribly. So improvement at that point was just eating hamburger helper, which at this point isn't, I realized wasn't the best diet, but it was an improvement. My hair stopped falling out after I did that, but I realized there was this huge domain that I was missing. And as I started to go into it, I had been doing all these things to stay sober. I had these, the way I describe it up to that point is I had done all these other quadrants, but I hadn't done the physical quadrant. So I learned to be emotionally and relationally buff. So I was carrying this 800-pound weight. And I always still kind of felt hypervigilant. I always kind of had this chronic low-level depression. And I just learned to carry it. And I learned to be, really strong, and I wasn't relapsing, but I was carrying this weight. I always had an extremely strong addictive pull, but I learned to resist it. So I did this conversion experience on my own physical health, and all that addictive pull went away. And I was just like, why didn't someone tell me about this earlier? So I want to tell you about this earlier. And it's not easy. This part's hard. It takes resources. It takes money. It takes time. So all the things that can be done so first, let me jump to, establishing, these are the things that can be done. But what I want is for you to have this conversion experience. So we have a course. It's holistic personal health. And it's focused around the Daniel plan. And ultimately, what I like to do for each of these domains is just kind of have a one-line summary of what I'd like for people to do. So implement the Daniel plan. It's a 5-point plan, and focus on physical self-care. So what does physical self-care look like? Establishing routines for healthy cooking and exercise. So once you get these routines, for me, my routine was I had to cook healthy in bulk, was a key thing. So I can do that once or twice a week, and then I eat healthy because I just don't have time to cook the rest of the time. And then exercising, once I did something for a couple weeks and I learned the routine, I just did it and I don't even think about it prioritizing good sleep and sleep hygiene. A lot of times whenever I can tell my physical health slipping, I'll listen to a book or a podcast or a video on physical health, because it's like listening to sermons. It helps keep you on the straight and narrow in the Christian life, and it's kind of the same thing. Learning how your physical health impacts other domains here, especially the emotions and also your thoughts. I noticed a lot of my negative thoughts went away, on this. Getting supportive friends on physical health. So people around me, the number one determinant on people's physical health actually is who their friends are, who those closest relationship to them are. And that's not that you have to stop being friends with people who are unhealthy. But try to, just like in recovery, you surround yourself with people that are going to support you. Pursuing regular medical care. I mean, there are years, maybe a decade, where I didn't go to the doctor. And, now what I do is I try to optimize my health with medical care. Psychiatric medication is needed. So, part of this journey for me was I went on antidepressant medication for a while. I didn't use it as a crutch to keep from dealing with these other things, but it was more like a crutch that actually helped me in my recovery process, because I needed to be able to walk, and without the crutch, I wouldn't have been able to walk, and it helped me walk. Eventually, once I improved my physical health, I tried, I got lower dose on my antidepressant medication, and then with, my doctor's support, tried going off it. And because of all these other things, I noticed that I felt as good or as better as I did with antidepressants. And, there's a lot of studies that show that if you do regular exercise, it's as good for your depression often, and sometimes anxiety, as antidepressants. And, what I was doing was combining those, but after I got my health good enough, I didn't need that. So how this relates to other things, the biggest barrier for me, why didn't I have this conversion experience? It was a toxic core belief that I just didn't think that this was important. That was probably the most significant thing. But also what got me into the hole of this was, I, at that point, had 35 or probably 30 some years of PTSD. And, that was exhausting my adrenal system, or in medical terms, it's called the HPA axis. And your body, it's kind of like running your engine of your car all the way in the red zone. And that's not good for your engine, right? So as I, started to improve my health, that also reduced a lot of the PTSD symptoms for me, because what it did is, as I've talked before, is it reduced the overall temperature. It helped me reduce my cortisol levels. Another way of saying this is, if your cortisol levels are too high chronically, then that's going to cause physical health problems. And then, the boundaries and self-care helped with physical health. I, stopped having a lot of the toxic relationships. I started having a better relationship with work, reducing my work stress, and doing a lot of self-care, and just recognizing my physical health. Taking care of my physical health is really important. That's helped me, honestly, with my work. I'm more productive now than I've ever been. And I am working less hours. I have less stress. And a part of that is, whenever I go into work, I'm in peak mental form. A lot of what I have to do is be in peak mental and emotional form. I often say to people, my work is kind of like being a mental athlete, and an athlete has to be in peak physical form. I have to be in peak mental and emotional form. And by having my physical health, that is driving that. So in the emotions, as I mentioned, I had chronic depression and had, not so much anxiety as just this fear, this hypervigilance, and that went down. And, that's helped my relationship. My wife is very supportive of me going and exercising, because she knows that that's going to make me a happier person and a better person to be around. So, this is an example of this positive spiral, and that's essentially what we want. So, ultimately, poor physical health can drive the addiction cycle. Ultimately, one of the biggest areas is you have poor physical health, and then that drives poor mental health. So, And we have a lot of articles and a lot of reading that talks about that connection. And I did not understand that connection. So this is a part of, healing your core beliefs, is understanding that connection. And that's really what prioritized it for me, because I didn't want to be, physically healthy just to be buff or whatever. Or to look good. It wasn't as much a priority as for me having good mental health. So knowing that that's going to reduce my, the other things. So whatever those things that are poor mental health. So if you have depression, you have anxiety, you have, hypervigilance, you have all these things, you're going to self-medicate. That's called increased addiction cravings. You're going to try to self-medicate. A lot of times people will use alcohol or use other things to help relax them, or use marijuana to help relax them, because they just have too much of that. So if you're, improve, what you can do is you have better physical health. That's going to give you better mental health. And then you're going to have decreased addiction cravings. And then what you're going to have is improved energy to invest in health, better finances for health, better living situation for health. And let me talk about this finances, energy, and living situation. A lot of the recommendations on health, it's going to require you getting more money. Just put it the bottom line. You're going to have to spend a little more on food. You're going to have more time, more free time to be able to do these things. So if you're working 2 jobs and you're making, near minimum wage, it's going to be hard to focus on health, right? So there's a very close relationship between, work and physical health. So that's another reason why, having this positive core belief that you have to learn to get a better job and move up in whatever job you're in so that you can make more money. That's not a sinful thing to make more money. You need that to invest in your overall recovery process. So what's the plan that we use here at City Vision? So we use something called the Daniel Plan. Many of you have heard of Celebrate Recovery. That came out of Saddleback Church. It's the most widely used Christian recovery program out there. And it's based around 12-step. It has a lot more Christian elements to it. But what this is, Celebrate Recovery has been used by, probably millions of people at this point. Daniel Plan, I know, has been used by thousands of churches. It's been used probably by tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. And it's essentially a church-based support group program to focus on your health. It was initiated by the same guy, the pastor of the same church that helped start Celebrate Recovery. And it's the most widely used and successful health program in the world for churches. Now, one of the things I need you to understand on this, so I have a really strong background in science. So I was at MIT. I worked among some of the best technologists and scientists in the world. And I've read probably 50 books in this space. And, there's a lot of good science that's out there. Sometimes Christians ignore that. Sometimes Christians don't want to pay attention to that. But part of what I loved about this program is, Rick Warren understood that he's not the world's top expert on health. But what he did is he recruited probably, I consider Mark Hyman, if definitely in the top 10 world experts on how do you get healthy. He is the founder of the Institute for Functional Medicine. He's been a doctor to several presidents to help them optimize their health. Another guy that's really well known in Christian circles is Daniel Amen. And they wrote this book. I read this, especially the chapter on nutrition is the best chapter that I've ever read on health in, about 100 pages. This is, designed, you can do it through a group, and you can do it through our course, but it also can be read and implemented by individuals. So what do we mean by holistic related to physical health? So the Daniel Plan has 5 components: faith, food, friends, fitness, and focus. Those actually relate a lot to our other components. So faith throughout our components, the food relates to the physical and self-care. The friends is the relationships. The fitness, is just on the physical, but the focus is about mental and emotional health. As a Christian university, what are we doing differently related to holistic physical health? So we're very interdisciplinary. So are we considering how all disciplines inform physical health? Are we seeing all disciplines within a Christian worldview? Are we combining the head, heart, and hands in a way that's consistent with biblical change? And that's what we're trying to do in our holistic health course. So that's our Gen 110 holistic personal health course outline. And what we do is we have, a week on each of those things: faith, food, friends, fitness, and focus. And we have, another one on cardio, fitness, and then the relationship of physical and mental health, and then creating long-term change. But part of what's different about this course is this is not a learning course that you're just learning cognitively. This is about change. So you got to do a 40-day plan on your food and your fitness. And, we say you can adapt it to whatever your context is. There's some people who are just not in a spot where they can do anything on their fitness for, maybe health reasons. Their doctor would say, don't try to do anything on your fitness. But the reality is what you're going to do in that course is you're going to have a 40-day plan, and you're going to implement that plan. And then the idea is you're going to use that 40 days as a launching pad to do what I did, is try to hopefully have this kind of conversion experience on your health. Now, some of you are already healthy physically, and you may be like, I don't have that much to learn. Well, it's kind of like being a Christian. You don't just stop going to church and you say, you know what, I've already figured out that Christian thing, and I don't need church, I don't need community, I don't need anything else. This is something that will help you, no matter where you are in your own personal health. This will help improve this. Now, relating this to some of the other concepts we talked about in the Wounded Healers course and program. So you have the circle of control. So what you eat, the exercise you do, and the self-care, that's your circle of control. That's where you want to focus. And then there's other, things that your circle of influence. And I probably should put money down here but medical care, you may not be able to afford, the best medical care. You can go to it. Your living context, as I mentioned, the number one thing that affects people's health is the people around them and their friends. If you're trying to get your health better, and you got friends that are pushing nacho cheese on you and other things, and your health's really a priority, that's like friends who are pushing alcohol on you. You need to recruit them. And just like you go to your friends and you're saying, you know what, I'm not drinking anymore. You have to go to your friends and family, and you have to be able to put up a boundary, and you say, you know what, do not encourage me to do that. If you're doing that, you're enabling me, just like if you're trying to get me to have alcohol, because this relates, to that. And, then the other thing is a circle of concern. And this is the biggest thing, just like everything else, it's easy to say I'm an addict because of my genes, and then I'm not going to do any work on it. Well, a lot of people who've been in recovery, they know that that's a fallacy, but then on their personal health, they might think that they may be thinking that way. And that's, again, a core belief that's not true. So your genes are what they are. But almost every health expert that I've heard say, what portion is your genes and what portion is your own decisions. Usually it's 70 to 80%, they say, is your own decisions. So you got your genes, you got your spot. The other thing I was going to put on here is what you've done in the past. Well, you can learn from that. So I don't want to take it out of your circle of influence. But a lot of times, just like you might get in a financial debt, and you may say, I made some mistakes and I'm in this huge financial hole. We get in this physical health debt. And, whenever I started this process, I was very overweight. I had, just a lot of problems, and it took me, over a decade to fully get out of it. And then there's some things that I haven't been able to fix that I think I caused some permanent damage in my body. And it is what it is that, but I'm doing everything I can still to improve that. Right. So City Vision's framework for food. Christians will be countercultural, we'll say, you know what, I'm just not going to drink around other people, or I'm not going to do drugs, or I'm not going to, do these other things that all my friends are doing, avoiding smoking, avoiding pornography. Well, what about harmful diets? Are we willing to be countercultural like that? Well, that's difficult because a lot of times our cultures are defined by our nutrition. So, the goal of universities like City Vision is to be on the cutting edge of what science is learning about health and nutrition. As I've mentioned, part of my job is I like to read. I read over usually 100 books a year, and I've read probably 50 books in this space. And I'm a good researcher. I'm a good, scientist, and we're getting the best of what's out there in this space. The reality is, most people aren't learning. What they're learning about food, they're learning from television and they're learning from ads, and it's just not true for the most part. But even governments are typically 10 to 20 years behind the science, and they're often influenced by the food industry. As many of you have heard, the government said that ketchup is considered a vegetable. So whenever you have school lunches, there's requirements that they have vegetables. Well, let's put ketchup on a hamburger and then we'll say that they got a vegetable. And that's essentially what happens. So what are some of the top recommendations for food? Think about what you will increase in your diet. So if you go shopping, one of the tips is shop the perimeter of the supermarket. That's the outside, because that's less processed, the more processed foods. I'll talk about the Daniel Plan plate and the Mark Hyman's food pyramid, things to avoid: sugary drinks, diet soda, fast food, junk food. One of our students who took our course, she said she wasn't even trying to lose weight, but she just cut out all sugar. And she said she lost 50 pounds, which is probably more than what I'd want people to do. 50 pounds in 8 weeks is a lot to lose. But the point is, and that's part of the idea of a 40 day, period. You can say, I'm just going to cut out sugar for 40 days, where you may not say I'm going to cut out sugar all the time, added sugar. And that's added sugar in any food. So, clean out your pantry and other sources of junk food. So if you're an alcoholic and you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to drink anymore, but you have a case of beer sitting in your pantry, that's a bad idea. So it's kind of the same thing with food. So if you're trying to cut down your food, but it's full of junk food, now this can be difficult if you're living with other people. And you got to get cooperation, and sometimes you just can't do it because they're going to eat those things. And, but you can ask your family and friends and ask for their support. Sometimes it can be helpful to do nutrition tracking. Generally you can get super complex in nutrition tracking. The most helpful thing is just to focus on total calories. If you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, you've probably already been trained in doing your total carbs. So that's important to keep track of. And honestly, if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic and you're not following what the doctor told you, you're not on the wagon. You're off the wagon, because that's going to really affect you if you're not following the guidelines on carbs. So I'm not trying to guilt anyone, but I'm just saying that it can have significant impact, on your health if you're not doing, what the doctor said. So try to take steps towards that, and ultimately that's what we're trying to do. So I talked about this thing called the Daniel Plan plate, and I want to talk about the difference between that. As I said, we're trying to stay on the cutting edge of science, and often the government plate is influenced, it's 10 to 20 years behind the science, but also it's influenced by a bunch of different lobbies. So the Daniel Plan plate is 50, and this is really hard for me to achieve. I'm not fully doing this, especially the 50% non-starchy vegetables, man. That's really hard for me. But this is, something to strive for. So 25% healthy animal or vegetable proteins, 25% healthy starch or whole grains, maybe a side of low glycemic fruit. And what that means is there's certain types of fruit that are super sugary, and drink water or herbal iced teas. And if there's any one thing I'd recommend for people is don't drink your calories. That's one of the things they say is, in our family, since we started doing this, everyone just always drinks water or something that's 0 calorie diet. Part of what you should recognize is that diet drinks have the same effect on insulin as regular drinks, even though they don't have the calories. So that can affect diabetes. And I'm not going to go into all the science of that, but that's something to recognize. If you look at my plate, they just kind of have this general. You can tell that the dairy lobby was in there. Making sure that you're getting your dairy, and dairy's fine for some people. There's probably about a third to half of the population that has a mild dairy intolerance and don't realize it. That was me, and that affected my health significantly. Anyway, so the Daniel Plan difference is it specifies healthy vegetables, protein, and fruit. So there's healthy aspects of this. So lean proteins, makes it a difference. So starchy versus non-starchy vegetables. is a big difference, and trying not to drink your calories. So that's one way of viewing it. This Daniel Plan plate versus my plate. So Mark Hyman, who is the co-author of the Daniel Plan, this is what he has. The foundation is this non-starchy veggie plant foods, and then you have healthy fats and proteins. You can see things like avocado and fish are examples. And then you have starchy vegetables and fruit. And then you have beans, legumes, and non-gluten grains, spices and herbs, and then recreational treats like a donut. And, the starchy vegetables are the foundation, focus on healthy fats and proteins, rather than lumping them together with unhealthy fats, and essentially significantly reducing grains to focus on healthier grains. Again, that's an area where I believe that the lobbies have had an impact. So, we talked about this 4-quadrant approach to a lot of different things. I want to talk about that with poor health. So, you have personal choices on health. You have, so these is the personal quadrant. You have shopping for food you keep at home, healthy or unhealthy habits, lack of time to invest in health, personal stress impact on health, misalignment with God's priorities, theology that devalues our physical body. So these are all things, and if you have core beliefs that devalue the importance of physical health, that's a problem. Then you have things out here: nutrition science, exercise science, medical treatments, hereditary disposition, nutrigenomics, and personalized medicine. So those are things that are important to learn about, but you may not be able to influence them. Then culture. This was honestly the biggest factor for me. It was culture where poor health and habits are the norm. Unhealthy processed food promoted in the mass media, culture and media promoting sedentary habits, watching TV, video games, social media, and churches that focus on negative health effects of smoking and drinking while ignoring food. And then societal, you have what's called food deserts, where, if you live in certain areas, it's really hard to find places that you can buy healthy food. A friend of mine was doing all his shopping at the dollar store, so it was all completely unhealthy, and that was because that was the only thing within walking distance. Lack of affordable, healthy food, highly affordable, accessible fast food and junk food, the food industry influence on government nutrition standards, limited physical environment for exercise, and economic injustice. So, what we'd like to do, so let's just use a case study. So Fred has been very unhealthy. He gets the majority of his calories from snacks, fast food, and soda. He's tried multiple diets that have failed. He's exercised in the past, but he's currently too busy. He has limited cooking and healthy shopping skills. He has a past history of addiction with current media addiction. So watches a lot of teams play, or a lot of TV and games. He's a current workaholic with codependent tendencies. He has a very stressful home and work environment. And this is one of the biggest factors for people in general who are in recovery: limited time and money to invest in health. And he wavers between feeling ashamed for poor health and blaming it primarily on genetics and limited time or money. So some of you may be relating to some of these things, right? So this is the personal quadrant, right? And that you have control over. So let's just use an example. So physically, he's age 40. He has type 2 diabetes. He doesn't count his carbs. He drinks soda. He's obese. He has PTSD. He has a family history of diabetes, heart disease, and addiction. He goes to the ER more than the doctor, so he's not doing preventive medicine, and he never goes to the doctor for checkups. And then relationally, so the majority of his friends and family are obese. He has gathering with family and friends that encourage poor diet, has very few friends who regularly exercise. And then, his extended culture, region, and churches largely encourage poor diet and make fun of people who try to be healthy. And they actually celebrate, even maybe the pastor celebrates being unhealthy. And primary source of information on what foods, are healthy are coming from TV ads. And he tries to buy foods with healthy and diet labels in grocery shopping, but he doesn't realize that that's almost all those things are actually unhealthy. And then in his physical environment, he lives in a food desert, so he doesn't have access to affordable health food around him. He primarily shops at a nearby dollar store for food. Has a limited physical environment for exercise. He lives in the inner city, and there's just not easy places to go run, and there's no local gyms around him, and he couldn't afford them. He frequents nearby cheap fast food restaurants for convenience, can't afford time or money to join the gym. And politically, he's kind of following this out-of-date food pyramid, primarily eating highly processed grains with added sugar. So that's kind of depressing, right? And that may be some of you. That's honestly was about where I was whenever I started my conversion experience, right? So, that's not to make you feel guilty, right? So it's just how do you move forward? So what's a 4-quadrant approach to improving health? So, you establish physically healthy habits. It's all about the habits. So learn to shop healthy and to shop the perimeter. So avoiding all sugary drinks and diet drinks, removing or hiding unhealthy foods at home. If you have, family members that need them there, tell them to keep them somewhere that's not right in front of you. Creating margin, time, and money to invest in health. Starting a fitness program. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It could be an app. It could be a gym. It could just be with friends. Just going for a walk. Taking your dogs. Learning about health, books and podcasts. Learning to cook affordable, healthy meals, and to better align with God's priorities. So don't overcommit on things. Then physically, going to annual checkups, getting needed medical treatment, getting a referral to a nutritionist if you can, if you have health that will support that. And then don't use medication to avoid, to essentially maintain unhealthy habits. I've, seen friends that they're drinking they're drinking soda like it's going out of style, and they just keep using more insulin, and their doctors told them to balance their insulin with soda. Well, that's like hitting yourself in the foot with a hammer and then taking more Tylenol because you're in pain in the foot. The point isn't to use the medication so you can eat more sugar, as an example. So optimizing nutrition. Nutrigenomics is how your genetics interacts with what you eat. Getting referred to a community health coaching plan. If you have money, seeing a functional medicine or integrative medicine doctor. There's the people who specialize in this. And then the cultural barriers, recruiting friends to support your health habits and find friends who value health. Communicate boundaries to friends and family about diet, to join a local Daniel Plan group or other health group, or to take our health course. Avoid settings that might lead to poor diet, and limit influence of media and sedentary habits, TV, video games, social media. And then solutions to societal barriers. So find sources for affordable health food. So there can be co-ops, sometimes food pantries, sometimes farmers markets, some of the chains that are more affordable, Aldi, Trader Joe's, Sprouts, if you have any of these around you. You can find affordable food there. Following the Daniel Plan plate or something similar rather than what the government's trying to do to get you to support their lobbyist. Find affordable, convenient fitness options that fit you. Just about everyone has a smartphone. There's good apps that you can use on that. Increasing your income by getting an education, allowing you to have more time and money to focus on health. And if your physical environment's problematic, as you get more money, try to relocate somewhere. So all these things are helpful. I realize this can be overwhelming. These are all the things that will train you in our personal health course. So I would encourage you to take that course and just think about these things as elements of your overall recovery, because what we're trying to do is improve your physical health, so that will improve your mental health, and that will reduce your addictive pulls just like it did for me. So hopefully this is all helpful for you. If you have any questions, ask your faculty member.